Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining and welcome back to Wall Street Silver. Joining us today is the legend, the man himself who needs no introduction, Jim Rogers. Welcome back, sir.
I'm delighted to be here, Ivan.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to have you back on Wall Street Silver. So, Jim, let's kick it off by talking about the Fed. Last year, everyone said the Fed has put themselves in a corner. Are they at the exact same point for 2023? What's your views?
I would say that is probably true any year you want to pick. Pick any year in the past 108 years, whatever it is, and it will be true. They don't know what they're doing. They're bureaucrats and academics. They're worried about their job. They're not worried about you. They're worried about their job, and they don't know what they're doing. There have been very few good central bankers in American history. I can think of maybe two. I can think of only three or four in the world in history. So they work for the government. They can't get a real job. So they become government employees.
Well, the big debate lately seems to be, do they keep raising rates, or are they going to be able to hold rates at like 5% for a long time? And a lot of people are speculating they just don't have that flexibility. The economy won't be able to handle it. The U.S. government budget, their interest on the debt, they won't be able to handle it. Corporate high-yield junk bonds won't be able to handle it. And they're going to be forced to lower rates again relatively soon. Or other people say, no, they're going to fight inflation through 2024. I mean, where do you come down on that side of the debate?
Well, I would like for them, I know what they should do. They should raise rates dramatically and kill inflation once and for all. Will they do that? No. It'll cost them their jobs, and they know it. In 1980, after a decade of inflation, interest rates on U.S. Treasury bills, 90-day Treasury bills, were 21%. That's not a typo, 21%, because they had to do something to kill inflation, and they did it. Will they do it again? No. These people are not as smart and not as tough. And in those days, the president said to the head of the central bank, his name was Paul Volcker, said, Mr. Volcker, you do whatever you have to, and I will support you. And he meant it. It cost him the election. Jimmy Carter lost the election because of it, but he supported Volcker, and Volcker took rates to 21%. Now, do you think these guys are going to take rates to 21%?
No.
Do you think they can even count to 21?
No.
Of course not.
But something else that was different in the late 70s and early 80s when all of that was going on, there was also a willingness by both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans, to finance energy, to have good policy to get energy projects going. So the Alaskan pipeline was built in the late 70s. Offshore Gulf of Mexico oil came online. North Sea oil came online. And that played a huge, it wasn't just interest rates going so high by Paul Volcker that killed inflation. It was all this new high quality, cheap energy coming into the market that also played a big role in reducing inflation. And we don't really have that same dynamic now. They don't seem to be willing to allow us to go out and explore for high quality, cheap energy these days, Europe and the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are also always lots of differences. In the 70s, America was still a creditor nation.
Good point.
Now we're the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. We had the Soviet Union. Remember the Soviet Union? We had Red China. A lot of things were different then, and a lot of things are different now. They always will be. We have new sources of energy now. There's solar power, wind power, etc. So something is always changing. We still have inflation, and it is worse now than before because we've had more money printing than we've ever had in the history of the world. Never in history of central banks printed this much. The head of the Bank of Japan said his word is, I will print unlimited. That's his word, unlimited amount. And he's doing it. He's doing it. So we have many differences always, but I don't see anything that's going to kill inflation. We're having a slowdown at the moment, but that's the way markets work. For goodness sakes, you guys know that. Nothing goes straight up and stays up. You have corrections along the way. We're having a correction now. They're not smart enough to understand that. I hope they mean it. I hope they will kill inflation, but I'm not optimistic.
So, Jim, banks are buying now more gold than they have in the past 55 years, since 1967. In your eyes, are they preparing for something big?
Well, there are two or three things going on. One, something big is coming, as you and I both know. But also, I mean, people are being forced away from the U.S. dollar, which is terrible. But an international medium of exchange is supposed to be neutral. Anybody is supposed to be able to use it for anything they want with no consequences. But unfortunately now in Washington, if they get angry at you, they put sanctions on you, even our friends. So even our friends are now saying, wait a minute, we have to find something to replace or compete with the US dollar. And many people are working on a competitor. But in the meantime, these guys are saying, well, wait a minute, we better be ready, because if they suddenly cut us off, what are we going to do? And if they get suddenly cut off, the only alternative right now is gold or silver or some of these international commodities.
All the talk is really the BRICS nations, China, India, Russia. You're doing a commodities-backed currency to try to sort of supplement the U.S. dollar, and supposedly Saudi Arabia is favorably inclined to join that process. I don't know if it's official yet. What do you think? I mean, you've been a commodities guy all your life. Do you think they could pull off what they're reportedly trying to do, create a new international reserve BRICS currency?
International, what kind of currency?
No, they want to create a new competitor for the U.S. dollar, the BRICS currency.
Well, the world can do it. It will depend on how much urgency there is. At the moment, they're acting slowly because there's no emergency yet. But if there's an emergency, yes. And if there were an emergency this afternoon, I'm sure they would immediately go to gold, because there's nothing else that they can act on immediately. Gold has never worked in the long term. It's been great for many, many periods of world history, but in the end, gold requires discipline, and politicians don't like discipline. Gold says, okay, guys, you cannot play games. You cannot spend more money than you have, etc. Well, politicians don't like that. That's why gold has never lasted, and why it probably never will. But they can come up with something, and they will come up with something in an emergency, because they'll have to. I really don't like the fact that our politicians are driving the world away from the US dollar. But no world currency has lasted more than 100, 150 years in history. And the US has been on top for a long time, currency-wise. I'm afraid that's coming to an end. We're the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. We print staggering amounts of money. We have troops in over 100 countries. I mean, some would say we might be overextended.
Well, that was the British Empire also. They got overextended with invading most of the other countries of the world, because it's very, very expensive to run an empire.
In 1923, the UK was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number two. 50 years later, they were bankrupt. That's not a typo. The IMF had to fly into Heathrow and bail them out. So it can happen. It has always happened, and it always will happen. And there are people who would tell you that the U.S. is now technically bankrupt. I mean, you can look at the numbers as easily as I can.
Yep, and we seem to have as many, foreign military bases all over the world. We seem so eager to get into military adventures in every country whenever possible. There's a lot of money to be made by certain people during wars, right? That seems to be as soon as we get out of. Yeah, go ahead.
I read a study recently. I didn't like the study, but it showed, the U.S. has been around since 1776 as a nation. In all but 15 years, in that period of time, we have been at war with somebody.
Yeah.
So those guys in Washington seem to like war. We're not very good at it anymore. We haven't won any big wars in a long time, but they still like it. Not good for us, but it's good for them. It seems to be good for them.
Jim, you've seen what happened to Iraq and Saddam Hussein when he wanted to sell his oil in he didn't want to sell it in the petrodollar. and Gaddafi, he wanted to sell his oil in the dinar and wanted to sell it in gold, and he moved away. But you see what happened to those countries. What happens when it officially happens with China or Russia or Saudi Arabia when they make the call? What happens to our way of life?
Well, as you know, China and Russia are a bit larger than Iraq and Libya, and they have a lot more influence and assets and guns than those other guys that you mentioned. And so if and when they decide to do it as a bloc, you and I are going to watch our standard of living decline, just as the British did. You know, the British standard of living started declining and went down for many, many years until bankruptcy.
Mhm.
I don't like saying any of this. It's a good time to be an old American because young Americans are going to have many, many problems. I've got 2 teenage kids. Oh, the problems that they're going to face in their lifetime are not going to be fun.
Yeah, Jim. So our favorite topic, Wall Street silver, silver and gold. Are you buying any silver and gold?
I have silver, as you all know. I always have some silver. Here's a little bit right here,
Oh,
just in
beautiful.
case. You never. This is actually North Korean silver.
Oh, nice.
Well, it's not much you can do with North Korean silver except melt it down. But anyway, yes, I have silver. I'm not buying any serious right now, but I will. I am always waiting, and at some point, the market will tell me, okay, it's time to buy more silver. Either there will be some panic sell or something will happen,
Right.
and I will buy more silver and gold, especially silver. I mean, gold too, but silver
Right.
is much cheaper than gold on a historic basis right now. Agriculture is certainly much cheaper than most commodities right now. I mean, things are so bad that the average age of farmers in America is 58 years old. In Japan, it's 68 years old. I
Wow.
mean, nobody wants to be more people in America study public relations than study farming. Nobody wants to be a farmer.
Well, you know, the best performing commodity in 2022 was orange juice. And I was wondering if you have a favorite commodity for the next year, 2023, that you think might outperform.
Outperform orange juice? Oh my gosh.
No, outperform, you know, just what do you think is going to be one of the top performing commodities? You made your name in commodities as an expert.
Well, guys, listen, I make many, many mistakes, for goodness sakes.
Well, we'll delete the video from YouTube. If you're wrong, we'll delete the video. No one will ever know.
We can sit here and talk about mistakes all day long if you want to. What I usually do is I get out the commodities and I look to see which has performed the worst. And if which commodities, if it's agriculture, which has performed the worst, and that's where I start. Because often, you've all been around a long time, you know that markets revert, then the people that are bad today will be good tomorrow, and vice versa. So that's the way I do it. I look to see who's the worst performer. If I can figure out why, then I often will take a position.
So is that the theory, like, oh, farmers aren't going to be planting so much of that because the price is low, therefore, you know, that's going to be less available, so price is likely to correct back to the mean?
Well, it's not a theory, it's the way the world works.
No, it totally makes sense. I just didn't know if that was your reasoning for thinking that way.
Well, no, it's because I've been around long enough and have read enough to know that that's how people act.
Yep.
You know, if farmers cannot make money planting X, they don't plant it. They plant something else. And if you and I can find something that if X is really, really cheap, chances are we're going to use more of X and whatever it is because it's so cheap. That's the way human beings have been for thousands of years.
Jim, we talked about other commodities like silver and gold, but are you buying any platinum? Are you watching the charts for platinum?
No, it's mainly because I'm too lazy. I'll leave it to Wall Street Week. To Wall Street Silver. You guys figure out whether we should be buying platinum now or palladium or something else.
So, Jim, you know, what's your general outlook for 2023? Are you bearish? Are you bullish? What's your just gut feeling?
Well, there's a huge amount of pessimism around right now. And in my experience, when there's so much pessimism, usually something happens to break the pessimism and we have a surprise rally. I would expect that to happen. I have no idea what will happen. but something, and we will have a better few months or a better year than most of us expect at the moment. I fully expect a recession on the horizon, et cetera, but that does not mean that something cannot happen. You know, China's just opened up again after several months, and China is the second largest economy in the world. So there can be good things happening in the world for a while. So I would suggest to people that if you're terribly pessimistic, you examine all the pessimism around. It usually does not last.
On that note, sir, thank you very much. And we look forward to talking to you again in the future, sir.
Hooray, me too. Don't sell your silver.
We will.
We will.